In today's video, we have some more NHL signings to discuss, plus we have the latest trade rumors from around the NHL. We're taking a look at the latest on McGroarty in Winnipeg, Patrik Laine in Columbus, plus are the Florida Panthers still trying to create some cap space? Could Aaron Ekblad be on the move? We'll discuss those possible scenarios. And Sidney Crosby, we're going to once again take a look at his future. One member of TSN and their analyst thinks that Crosby should end up in Toronto next year after his contract expires if he does not re-sign with Pittsburgh. We'll discuss how that could work, what it could mean, and if he should do it, coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to take a look at. We got a handful of signings to take a look at, and then the latest rumors from around the NHL. Let's get started first with some of the signings we saw today on Sunday, July the 7th. We have the Carolina Hurricanes signing centerman Josiah Slavin. Yes, that's the brother of Jacob Slavin, who's a 25-year-old centerman, mostly played in the minor leagues throughout his pro career. He gets a one-year, two-way deal. It's a little bit more lucrative at the AHL level, providing a $150,000 salary, league minimum at the NHL level. He does have 15 NHL games to his resume. He's played in a variety of settings, most recently played in the Marley system. So Slavin goes to Carolina to join his brother in the same organization, most likely going to play in their AHL affiliate, of course, as well. So Jacob Slavin's brother joins Carolina. The Philadelphia Flyers today have signed our pending RFA defenseman Igor Zamula. Zamula gets a 2-year deal. The 24-year-old left shot D will have an average annual value of $1.7 million. So that's a pretty good contract for him. Good raise. So that's one more RFA off the books for the Flyers. The Utah Hockey Club, I guess it's still weird calling them that. I hope they get a team name soon. Utah signs Curtis Douglas, who is a big 6'9", 248-pound centerman. He was drafted back all the way in 2018 with the Dallas Stars. He never signed, never played pro or anything like that with them. Ended up having a AHL, I think it was AHL only contract with the Senators. Played with their Belleville team for a handful of games. Then he went to the Toronto Marlies, was with the Leafs organization for a couple of years. Last year he played with Tucson, so he's theoretically a member of the Coyotes organization, which of course is now Utah. So it's more of a re-signing because he was in Tucson last year, but he gets a new contract for another year with Utah. So massive guy, yet to really make his mark in the NHL. Hard to say if he's going to, but he's absolutely mammoth of a man. We'll see if he ever gets a crack at it or not. And the Columbus Blue Jackets today have signed an older prospect goalie as well, Zach Sawchenko. He's somebody who's taken a long path to get an NHL opportunity. He has played through the Western Hockey League in the Canadian Juniors, and then he went through the U Sports route after not getting a pro opportunity. After that, he went to the University of Alberta, played out his duration there, and then he's been getting some opportunities between the East Coast League and the American Hockey League most recently. And then he did get 7 games of NHL experience with the San Jose Sharks. So he joins Columbus, obviously adds to their depth. He'll play in one of their minor league teams, most likely the American Hockey League, I would think, and we'll see what happens. But it's an older guy, older prospect who's taken a long path to get an opportunity, but sometimes they pan out. We'll see what this means for Zach Sawchenko. Onto the rumor mill today. We got a variety of things to take a look at. Really 3 players, and then a big UFA maybe for next year for Sidney Crosby, which is what somebody at TSN who would like to see him go to Toronto. We'll discuss that here shortly. But Patrik Laine, let's start with him. We know that the Columbus Blue Jackets and Laine have agreed that it would be great and probably a wise move for both sides if they could find a trade for him and move him along and get him a fresh start. We know the team is certainly going to be taking a new direction under new general manager Don Waddell. He's already made some changes and will continue to do so likely throughout the campaign and into next year. It's going to take a little while to really kind of feel all the philosophy changes and change in direction there. But the one thing that seems to be holding up a potential Laine deal, a couple of things. One is the fact that he theoretically still has not been released from the player assistance program. Now, when that happens, it may not be like a public NHL announcement. I'm not really sure how that's going to work. they may not be making a big deal out of it where it's the offseason right now. I don't know. But Laine has not been released as of right now. And another thing, too, former NHLer John Scott has a podcast, and he was talking about Laine on his podcast here. I just saw some clips from here in the past couple of days, and he made some good points, and I just kind of wonder. Like he said, for example, some of the teams that would have the space to take this contract on would be a lot of the teams that are rebuilding. If you're San Jose, if you're Chicago, if you're, any of these teams, Columbus, well, obviously Columbus is where he's at now, like any of these teams near, the bottom of the standings that had a high pick this year, Anaheim's another one. Do you want to bring in Patrik Laine? I mean, Patrik Laine, I wouldn't say we can't say he's been a problem because that's not really the case, but, he certainly had some issues in Winnipeg, and I do think to some degree, some of it was self-inflicted, and some of it was the leadership there. From what I've seen and heard and read, I think there's a variety of things. At one point, he was a pretty big gamer. I don't know if he's still into that or not, but he sometimes had a reputation for being a little lazy, just not working hard enough. I know I used to hear some of the vets, especially I remember Dustin Byfuglien, when he was still there in Winnipeg early in Laine's career, used to yell at him to move his feet a lot on the ice. You would hear him because Big Buff was loud. For example, you get all that, and then take a look at everything he's been through since. Like the last couple of years haven't been great for him since he's left Winnipeg. He never really found his stride in Columbus. Ended up in this player assistance program. So it's not like you want to hold all that against him or anything. But the way Scott's talking is like, he's like, is he the kind of guy that comes to mind when you think, okay, we're going to bring in a more experienced vet to kind of work with our young kids and kind of teach them to be a pro, teach them to be leaders, and teach them to, lead the way, so to speak. It's not exactly the kind of guy that comes to mind. So if you take away a lot of those rebuilding teams where it may not make sense for him to go, it does certainly really shrink that pool of teams that could even consider making a move based on their salary cap situation. Now, we don't know what Columbus will do cap-wise. They may be willing to retain up to 50%. I know Don Waddell's original comments shortly after becoming GM there, he had said that preferably they would like to find a way to move on and not have to retain salary. But it's going to drastically reduce your return, too. I mean, this is kind of a damaged asset, so to speak. It's an underperforming asset. That's somebody who's not living up to expectations, who's making a hefty income. You're going to have to basically give them away for close to nothing unless you're going to eat some salary, and then which you're going to help the other team out, and then maybe in return they'll give you more of a return package. I don't think it's going to be a big return otherwise. So at the end of the day, there are definitely some teams. I had mentioned, to me, based on everything that's happened with their roster this year in the summer, I think Carolina makes a ton of sense for Laine. I think the structure and the coaching of Rod Brind'Amour would be great for him. He's got a lot of Finnish teammates that have gone through that organization, and some of them are still there, that he knows well. So to me, like, it gets him around some people that he knows. Great leader and coach in Rod Brind'Amour, who might be just a guy to really push him. Because I think that's going to be what he needs to really elevate and take that next level. We saw him be a 40-goal guy in Winnipeg, and he has the skills. Like, he's got a wicked shot. He's a smart guy. He's got, he's big. He's 6'4", over 200 pounds. Like, there's no reason why Laine can't be tearing up the NHL if he's healthy, both, physically and mentally, and he's, putting in the work. So I understand why this might be more complicated, and I think John Scott's comments on his podcast does make a lot of good points here. So we will see. I do think at the end of the day that they're going to figure it out, and it may not even be something that happens throughout the offseason. Maybe he goes into training camp. Maybe he has to kind of reprove to everybody that I'm here, I'm healthy. I got released from the program. That shoulder procedure, that's not an issue. And maybe he starts the year, if he can have a good start, and then maybe they can find a taker. I'm sure they've had lots of conversations around him, but it's going to be tough to pull the trigger, especially if they don't want to eat too much of the salary. But I don't know why they wouldn't, be honest, because it's not like he's going to turn his team around and be in a contending spot within 1 to 2 years and need that space to really try to put them over the top or something like that. That's not going to happen. So I don't know. Really, I think Waddell probably will end up eating money on the deal to make a trade when it does happen. I just think that's his way of trying to put it out there that he would prefer not to, and really what GM wouldn't. So we'll see. When it comes to Rutger McGroarty in Winnipeg, I've seen some comments from Sportsnet reporter Sean Reynolds, who recently appeared on a Winnipeg Sports Talk podcast, just kind of talking about McGroarty and how everything's kind of gone down. I mean, we know that he was drafted as a pretty high potential prospect. Continued to live up to the hype in University of Michigan in college, played extremely well, and a lot of people were quite surprised at the end of his college season that he didn't sign with the Winnipeg Jets. And he said, no, I think I'm going to go back to school for a third year. Like, it's just, okay, didn't expect to see that. And then we find out later, more recently here, that he would prefer a trade because it seems like his talks with the Winnipeg Jets and the relationship with the Jets really soured after, either towards the end or after his season was over in college. He wanted to sign and be guaranteed a spot right in the NHL to make that jump and leap that he thought he was ready and capable for. And the Winnipeg Jets were like, whoa, slow down. We'd like to sign you, but I don't know about guaranteeing you an NHL spot. How about you put in? We're in the middle of a playoff race here. We're trying to win our division. We've got the capable bodies we think right now that we're able to do that with. Why don't you start in the American Hockey League, and then maybe depending on injuries or whatnot, we can work your way into the lineup, get a little bit of experience first. And he didn't want anything to do with that, and that's kind of seems from what we've heard where things have gone wrong. And the comment from Sean Reynolds was, essentially, you have somebody coming in. Yes, he said, acknowledge him as a high-ranking prospect who had a really solid developmental season in U.S. college hockey. But, he's never played pro. I don't care how well you've done it at different levels. The fact that you've got a kid coming in that's never played pro, is not established, and they're automatically, wanting this. They want everything without having to prove themselves. He said to him, it's a major problem and a major red flag. And I kind of wonder if that might be holding up a trade. Because obviously, if you look around the NHL, there's been a number of teams that we've heard being interested. We've, according to the fourthperiod.com, we've heard Boston, Montreal, the Islanders, the Sabres, Carolina, Anaheim. From other sources, I've heard Ottawa as well. So there's at least 7 teams. I'm sure there's more. There's got to be more because this guy is an intriguing prospect. I've had some degree of conversations with the Jets and have expressed some interest to trade for him, and yet they've not pulled the trigger. He didn't go to development camp. It just seems like at this point, it's Cutter Gauthier all over again. We know with Cutter Gauthier and the Flyers, it kind of was the same sort of thing. And these guys Cutter Gauthier and Rutger McGroarty are like best friends. So I can't help but wonder if there's an influence there. If the word was that he's seeing some of his friends and teammates, line mates from college go straight to the NHL too. But they're all on different teams. Some of the teams that they're playing on are also rebuilding teams that don't have anywhere near as deep a lineup as what Winnipeg had. Some of his teammates ended up in Chicago and Columbus and Anaheim, looking at Gauthier. Gauthier wasn't a teammate, but like a close friend. Not the same scenario at all. They were completely different spots, rebuilding. Could they have afforded to give those prospects a couple of games at the end of the year just to kind of test out and see how they handled it, where they're at? Sure they can. A lot of teams that are out of the race do that as a way to gauge their prospects and see where things are at to get a glimpse of the future. And the fact that McGroarty remains demanding that just hand it over. I don't need to prove myself. I've done it in college where the program is completely different. I do have to wonder, after listening to what Sean Reynolds had to say, if it might be having an impact here on the trade. I don't know if the Jets are letting other teams speak to him. Obviously, to some degree, if they get close to a trade, I'm gonna assume that they're gonna bring the player in and be like, would you sign with this team? And they're going to probably want to have conversations with the other team and be assured of what's the plan? Where do you see me playing? Where are you going to put me? And, well, if they like the answer, then maybe it goes through. So I don't know. I mean, look at the Buffalo Sabres. I mean, the Sabres are one of the teams that have been interested here. They had a guy like Matt Savoy. I think Matt Savoy is NHL ready. They just traded him for Ryan McLeod. I don't see them trading for McGroarty and putting him right in the NHL lineup. I mean, maybe they'll surprise me. They have surprised me a few times here in the recent days here with some of their moves, but I just don't know. Look at Boston. I'm not sure. Montreal, maybe, but Montreal still has a lot of vets in their lineup. They still have Josh Anderson. They still have Gallagher. They still have Armia. They didn't really do much in the way of moving off some of these veterans yet. And they haven't pulled off the trade that we were expecting for them to add another top young player as well. So he could be that guy, but where's he going to play? That's the big part of the question, right? So Anaheim with his buddy Gauthier does make some sense. I don't know what they would offer. I do kind of wonder if they would end up there, because Pat Verbeek is one of the guys who could probably say, yeah, we've got a spot for you in our NHL lineup, and you could play with your buddy Cutter Gauthier. I don't know. I do wonder. I mean, the Ducks have all kinds of interesting prospects too. So, I mean, the word was if Winnipeg's going to pull off this trade, that they want a player back that they felt was somewhat comparable, or it doesn't necessarily even have to be a forward, but like somebody who is, considered an A prospect like him and has high upside. So we'll see what happens. But the fact that, the red flag and just the way things have played out, I do wonder if it's holding things up, and maybe some teams might have more concerns. I think Sean Reynolds certainly has some valid points there. And if I'm Winnipeg, I think they, as much as you want the player to eventually be in your lineup and you don't want to lose a prospect, I understand why you take that stance. I mean, you start handing things over without making players prove itself. It's no different than when you're a parent. If you never say no to your kids and you just give them everything, you don't teach them the hard work and what you got to do to prove themselves and to earn things, you can create a monster. So, same idea. So, we'll see. In Florida, they're very, very tight on cap space, of course, as we know, the defending Stanley Cup champions, as we'll call them now. They definitely are a little bit depleted from what we saw in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, we had a lot of players vacate the Panthers so far. They still have, I guess you could say, most of their top core players. We didn't see any vacancies that way. I mean, they still have, your top six now is going to be Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart. Maybe not necessarily in that order, but like Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart, Bennett, Verhaeghe, and now Anton Lundell steps up. Lundell is getting a new contract, being paid $5 million per year, so he's going to have to elevate his game to match that, which will elevate his role as well. But I mean, we saw Tarasenko go. We saw, Lomberg's gone, Ekman Larsson's gone, Montour's gone, a lot of the other, depth supporting cast gone. So, completely different looking blue line. Now, the one thing with Aaron Ekblad has been the main name that's been out there as far as creating some space. He's got 1 year left, making over $7 million. Word is for him that he would take a pay cut to stay. So, that will maybe give him a chance to work that out. The other thing too is they don't have a lot of right shot defensemen. They brought in some interesting depth options on D this free agency period, like Nate Schmidt, for example. But they have a lot of lefties. They don't have a lot of righties. Where Ekblad's arguably their top one, especially with Montour gone now. So as much as his cap hit kind of isn't something they're overly fond of for what they would like to get out of it, it's going to be complicated. I mean, I do wonder about Spencer Knight as well. I think that, long term, I'd be careful with that because he could still be your goalie of the future. You've only got Bobrovsky for a couple more years. How long can he keep up his strong play? You have to have, that option waiting in the wings, so to speak. So I don't know. I mean, the Panthers at this point are not really in a position where they absolutely need to force a move here. They've got all their internal business taken care of. They don't have any pending restricted free agents. They've got, UFAs that have walked, sure, but they've also brought in some cheaper depth options that were available in the market, and they may end up in a situation where this is the team that goes to training camp. Like they're not really forced to make a move. I mean, if you look at Cap Friendly, which is still online, I'm not sure when it's going offline, it has them a smidge over the cap. And that can be fixed real easy because it shows them with 13 forwards and 8 defensemen. So if you take the couple of guys on that roster that would likely get cut to trim things down, you're looking at creating anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million in space. So they're not completely without, but to me, that bottom 6 is completely gutted. It's very different. I don't know. I think they'd probably like to upgrade it if they could. And, at the same time, looking at the blue line, I don't know that it's as good as it used to be either. But then you move Ekblad, is it going to get better? No. And, as much as his name's been out there, they're limited on a right shot D. The blue line's not as strong as it used to be. I just don't know that it's what the odds are. If Ekblad goes, then they absolutely need to get another right shot defenseman coming back in a trade and somebody that maybe makes less money. I don't know. I mean, I know Ekblad has some trade protection, I believe. I'd have to check Cap Friendly again, but I'm pretty sure he's got a modified no trade. So there are some teams he can block. Winnipeg comes to mind. Obviously, like Neil Pionk, for example. Would they swap Ekblad for Pionk? It would be less money. Winnipeg would probably love to do that in a heartbeat, but I don't know that Florida would. We'll see what happens, but it's out there. I'm not convinced that it's going to happen. It could be something different that we see out of Florida, but they are definitely tight on space and would like a little more breathing room. Now, when it comes to Sidney Crosby, we've talked about his future a couple of times here recently. One as early as yesterday, just talking about the fact of his comments from, not his comments, but comments from his agent, Pat Brisson, and comments from Kyle Dubas. It just kind of planted a seed of doubt that maybe he doesn't sign an extension this offseason. And maybe there is a chance that Sid doesn't come back to Pittsburgh and, maybe after next year he's out playing on another team. I mean, it's hard to imagine. It'd be weird as, looking at him in a new jersey. But, it just kind of coming more and more like maybe there's a chance. And Brian Hayes, one of the hosts of Overdrive, who, of course, they are a Leafs-based podcast program out of Toronto, of course. And we know Hayes is openly a Leaf fan, so there's no shock here to say that he's created a thought process and way to justify Crosby going to Toronto. Now, of course, he says this wouldn't be via trade. This would be assuming that Sidney Crosby does not sign an extension this offseason, decides that he's going to go into Pittsburgh and just play it out and make his decision later. He thinks Sid should go to Toronto. Real looking at it, he's like, Sidney Crosby is one of the greatest players of all time. He's certainly one of the best, if not the best, of his generation. He's a proven winner. He scored some massive goals, including the golden goal for the 2010 Olympic Games. He's got a couple of 3 Stanley Cups to his name. One of the greatest captains, one of the greatest centermen. There's just so many accolades that this guy has. Why not be the guy that comes home to Canada and helps end the Canada Stanley Cup drought and help bring it to Toronto? He also justifies this by saying, of course, that John Tavares' contract is up after next year. You make the space by just simply not re-signing Tavares. We don't know, of course, the future if that would include Mitch Marner or not. Regardless, even if it does or it doesn't, the cap would go up. You'd lose JT's contract. They, in theory, could do it. The next big question, though, is would Sid want to do it? And I know there's somebody else that when it comes to saying they're going to end or help bring Crosby to Toronto to end the Canadian Stanley Cup drought, I think there's somebody in Edmonton that wears number 97 and might have something to say about that and thinks he's going to do that next year anyway, so that even if Crosby was available next offseason to sign with the Leafs or whoever else, that drought will be over. At this point, the Oilers are one of the top betting favorites to win the Stanley Cup next year. They were as close as you can get this year without actually winning it. And to be honest, they probably at this point will be my pick going into. They're my early pick right now going into next year to win the Stanley Cup. So I don't even know that that's going to be a thing in 2 seasons from now. But we'll see. It could be. It's not going to be easy by any means. So as much as I can completely understand Brian's thought process. He would be a phenomenal addition to any team. He would make any team instantly, especially one that's already pretty strong. To take it from being a good team to a great team to being a contender, I get all that. I just don't know that Crosby would have any desire to. For one, I'd still think if I had to place a bet, I would still bet that he figures out a way to work things out to stay in Pittsburgh. If he does not, my two betting teams that I would bet on would that he joins forces with his good buddy Nate McKinnon in Colorado, or maybe, depending on what stage we're at, I'm talking maybe 2-3 years down the road before he wraps it up completely. Maybe does 1 year in Montreal. A lot of people seem to think that that's something that would be intriguing to him. He grew up, obviously his dad was drafted by the Habs. I'm not sure how much of a Habs fan he was as a child, but, maybe. But to me, Crosby is hyper competitive. He is a guy that absolutely more than anything wants to be the best and wants to win. And yeah, I can see Toronto having a shot, and maybe he would be the missing piece, but I don't know. I don't know that he's going to care about the Canadian thing. I think he's going to, if he decides that he's going to move on from the Penguins, I think for him he's going to join forces with, some of his closest friends. That would be my bet. I would think the Avalanche, just because of that McKinnon relationship. McKinnon is wired the same way as Crosby. They want to win at all costs. Why not have one last shot doing it together? The two Cole Harbour kids doing it. If I had to pick, that's what I think could happen. But I still think Pittsburgh has the best odds for him to stay. But I don't know. I mean, there's a chance he goes. I think Brian Hayes has justified this in a way that does make a lot of sense. I'm just going to have to go out and say that I just don't think there's any chance that Crosby does it. I really don't. But let me know what you think. Is Hayes onto something? Would Crosby go to Toronto? If I'm Toronto and I'm Brendan Shanahan, I'm Brad Treliving, I'm doing everything I can to talk to Sid. If he's available next summer and he does want to consider moving on from Pittsburgh, absolutely. Toronto would be stupid not to get in line and get a meeting with this guy, one of the greatest of all time. I just don't know that unless that they really have a legit shot at doing it. But crazier things have happened. I think other avenues are more likely, but let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.